This segment of the news is brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.
Welcome back. The Attorney General has some choice words for the opposition in the face of its continued criticism of the government following the Bahamas being issued an EU advisory. As BJ McDermott tells us in this report, the AG is actually chalking up the listing to what he calls the PLP's incompetence.
The oppositions had a lot to say in response to the European Union issuing an advisory to the Bahamas and 22 other jurisdictions last week, citing strategic deficiencies in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing frameworks. Opposition Deputy Leader Chester Cooper at the time called on the Prime Minister to explain why there has been a failure in his negotiations that led to this. While Attorney General Carl Bethel today sought to dispel reports that the PM's recent trip to Brussels, Belgium was to address such concerns.
They failed to do anything of substance between 2015 and 2017. That is why the Bahamas got placed into the FATF action plan, because of the neglect of the PLP. And if they really want to have a debate about it, it won't go well for them, because the facts are the facts. We are trying to have a mature approach to this, a national approach to it. We don't want to get into name calling, finger pointing, or anything like that. But for the opposition to spew falsehoods against the Prime Minister and against this government is simply not something that will be tolerated. We will answer with the truth.
The government continues to stress that perceived deficiencies that led to the Bahamas being named has been addressed. By year end, the Bahamas was essentially compliant with 30 of the 40 requirements, putting it on par with the United States. However, according to the AG, they are working on a strategy to further address the issue.
We have been in consultation with lawyers who are very familiar with the workings of the European Union, who are aware of who the key personalities are, and in short order the government will engage in the necessary consultations to see what we can do about this listing.
All in all, the Attorney General condemns the opposition's attacks as baseless. Reporting for JCN News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Well, Opposition Chairman Fred Mitchell has since fired back, charging that last week when the AG branded the EU's decision unwarranted, prejudiced, and indefensible, there was no talk of the PLP. The F&M, he said, has caused the Bahamas to be blacklisted, and the governing party ought to be ashamed. In other news this evening, Labour Minister Dion Folk sharing some words of advice to the 73 workers Commonwealth breweries made redundant. The group was given the boot in what the company says is a restructuring exercise, its first such decision since going public.
Number one, seek the unemployment benefit, which will give them some leeway until they're able to find another job. And number two, and this is very important, to register with the Department of Labor with our employment exchange.
Now, based on what the minister shared with reporters outside Cabinet this morning, some of those made redundant have already taken advantage of the new positions CBL's offering.
The law says that if any number over 20 are being made redundant, that there must be a 2 weeks notice period to the Minister of Labor. And anything under 20, there must be 1 week's notice period. I was very pleased at the measures that Commonwealth Brewery, even though it's bad news, that they adopted, including the counseling for those who were affected and doubling the entitlement for severance pay to all of those persons affected.
CBL Director of Retail Ron Hebburn says the redundancies were the result of increased operational cost coupled with increased competition from imported beer brands. Of the 73 workers let go, 53 were employed in New Providence and the remaining 20 in Grand Bahama. Public and private national security agencies spending the next 3 days locked in an intense training session aimed at ensuring the correct legislations in place to tackle nuclear terrorists that may come through the Bahamas. The workshops facilitated by Interpol. However, the workshops not just for enforcement officers. And as for the focus on nuclear terrorism, here's how Police Commissioner Anthony Ferguson thinks this impacts the Bahamas.
Think that way. The Bahamas, as you heard me say, the Bahamas is a part of a global village. The Bahamas exists on the planet. And so anything is likely to happen. The most important thing is to be ready and be able to respond to anything that happens.
Interpol conducted a similar workshop last December. At the time, the focus was on training national security forces on how to detect and intercept the smuggling of radiological and nuclear materials. Our final story is up next.
This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.